Thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Justin White. We're at PRI 2024 in the Liberty booth with Craig Liberty and
Nicole Liberty.
You're hiding it. Nicole Liberty, Liberty Transmissions. If you watched the Go Hard podcast, you might have seen with Jay Meager, we had talked about him using the Liberty transmission and his success through the years using it. So we're at PRI, we saw Liberty and we thought, man, we want to hear the story. We kind of want to know where this came from, where the idea came from, and kind of, tell us about it. So you guys are based out of Michigan, you said?
Yes, we're out of Michigan. The company's been based in Michigan its entire life. We went incorporated back in 1973, so we've been around quite a while. Back in 73, we started out making a pro ring on a Ford top loader transmission. Basically, my dad, he was a tool and die maker at Cadillac Motor Company. Had a transmission, manual transmission, tried to drag race, and anybody that's tried to drag race a fully synchronized manual transmission knows they don't shift very good. High RPM, you have a lot of problems. So he came up with the Pro Ring, which is today's logo. That logo is it's an odd looking thing, but that is the Pro Ring that he designed back in early 70s. And people saw him going down a racetrack with a stick shift transmission that didn't quite sound like an automatic, but definitely shifting better than they could shift, and wondering what he did. And so they started having him modify transmissions for him. And so he would put Pro Rings onto Ford top loaders, Chrysler Hemis, Borg Warner Super T10s, things like that, the transmissions of the day back in the 70s. And it eventually evolved to where he was so busy with that he gave up his job as a tool and die maker at Cadillac Motor Company and decided to open up Liberty Skiers. At which point the next step is, okay, let's make a transmission shift better. And he tried to come up with a clutchless transmission. First transmissions were a single countershaft clutchless transmission in a Chrysler 833 case. And so single countershaft, 4-speed. They shifted terrific. The problem is they just kept breaking gear sets. And so he had all these broken gear sets. Monday mornings were hell at the shop. A lot of phone calls from a lot of big names, the names that you would hear from back then. Like it was just the Ronnie Socks and Butch Leal and the names that we have on our wall at the shop it's pretty special. But again, Monday mornings, Don Carlton, whatever. But anyhow, the Monday mornings they were tough. So one day my dad had a bunch of broken gear sets on his desk, and he's looking at them, and he basically just took a second cluster gear, put it on the other side of the speed gear, and started looking at it thinking, well, what breaks a transmission is the separation. So you've got a gear that's in constant mesh, and as you separate and you get separation and spread, they come out and you get enough leverage, it snaps a tooth off.
Yep.
So he just felt that, well, maybe if I put a second cluster over here, it might work. And so we took a transmission, a Chrysler 833, rotated it 90 degrees, put a second cluster on it. And I say it was him. I was pretty young at the time. And so I was no part of any of this. So this was 100% my dad, Joe Liberty, first generation Liberty skiers. That came up with this. And again, it was out of necessity. It's, of course, what necessity is the mother of invention. Is that how I forget the saying? But so out of necessity came up with this second cluster gear, and it pretty much saved the company because it built this platform of a dual countershaft transmission. At the time, we didn't realize there were semi-transmissions that had dual countershafts. We didn't know this, or he didn't know this at the time, but so Eaton was one of them, and so we couldn't figure out quite how to make the gears accurate enough to key the center, the cluster gears, and make them accurate to time enough. So he actually went to Eaton, and Eaton helped us actually make our very first cluster gears, and which was kind of cool that they would go out of the way to do that for us. And, so they were actually part of our very first ones. And then as time went on and evolved, of course, everything comes in the shop, and you learn different ways, more efficient ways of doing things. Back then, the transmission, when it first came out, it was probably good for about 12 to 1400 horsepower. the same basic design today. That transmission was so far ahead of its time that same basic design today with quite a few tweaks, different metallurgy, different tooth profiles. It now handles over 5,000 horsepower and shift with clutchless shifts, the impact of a clutchless shift with virtually zero failures. Unfortunately, my dad wasn't around long enough to see excuse me, get choked up talking about him.
All right.
To see the 5,000 horsepower capabilities, but it's amazing what he left me. So first generation passing it on to me, I have the luxury of having a third generation now, Nicole, that gets to take over the reins eventually, and you know, maybe, I mean, it'd be nice. The sooner it is, the better. I get to enjoy some type of retirement, which my dad had the luxury.
Retiring.
Yeah, well,
My dad, he didn't seem like the type
my
that's
dad
going to
had
want to
the
relax.
luxury of enjoying some retirement, so I would like to. But so I have the luxury of having a third generation that wants to take over. And Nicole, you can tell a little bit about your background, because I feel she's going to be a very good fit for this position.
I mean, I took a little bit of a different route. I did end up going through college. That was a big thing when I was graduating high school. They kept pushing, like, you need a bachelor's to be successful. And even though I knew this is what I wanted to do from day one, he actually made me go to college just so I had a backup plan. So I got an engineering degree from U of M and did some business management classes, and then came back to the shop. So I have a little bit different insight than maybe they do, and hopefully at some point that can bring in
and that can help you kind of have like an edge as far as business communications, you know, knowing kind of how the world works, because it's a little bit different now.
Right,
than
exactly.
it was before.
Yes, it's evolving very quick.
So the college aspect obviously would help a lot.
Yeah.
And did you say engineering?
Yes, mechanical engineering.
Wow. So that's perfection, right?
Yeah.
So she'll be the one that makes one for 10,000 horsepower.
Yes.
Did
very well could be.
Did your dad ever expect this thing to go to 5,000? Like, did he think?
I don't believe so. He did what he needed to do at the time, and at the time we didn't have 5,000 horsepower combinations out there. The alcohol cars weren't even. I don't think we're making that type of horsepower back then. Alcohol funny cars and dragsters, let alone a pro mod car. So when we first, I believe it was Halsey was our first 5-second car that finally dipped into the fives in the quarter mile with one of our transmission. You know, that was a pretty big number for us. That was a huge thing.
Yeah.
Now these guys it's sick what these guys are running. It's actually scary for me watching these cars go down racetracks. And just last week, you know, you had the was it Drag Illustrator race where there were 32 cars in Pro Mod all running within 500ths of each other. And that's just the 32 qualified cars. From what I understand, there was like 60 some cars there. And, you know, and big names going home, not qualifying. And it's amazing what drag racing has turned into. And if you think about those 32 cars, these were turbos, some were nitrous. They were, of course, screw blown and well, I would imagine screw blown, but definitely roots blown. Just every combination. And to get that tight, so you know somebody's really doing their job on the rules package. That part, kudos to them. But the fact that all these combinations have that type of horsepower and can put a car taking, a lot of them are same style chassis, of course, same tire, but some of them they're just lockup converter and 3-speed, 4-speed, 5-speed. Some could be more than that. Some lockup, some non-lockup. No clutches out there that I know of that were out there qualifying, but all these different combinations coming together, and any one of those cars could be running our transmission. Some of them run, of course, turbo 400s. Some of them run Lenkos. It's absolutely amazing that we could build a product that can withstand those forces, zero failures. We simply do not break things. Now that I say that, I should be knocking on wood somewhere, but you know how it is with that much horsepower. But it's just amazing. Did my dad ever think it would come to this? Probably not. I don't know that he really thought this far ahead. He retired back in 2000.
Okay.
So this is 24 years later. So did he look 24 years ahead? Probably not. But then again, when he built this transmission, designed this transmission back in the 70s, the year it came out, it actually won SEMA's Best Engineered New Product Award. Extremely prestigious award. And so apparently the judges for it, or the engineers looking at new products, understood that this thing was as revolutionary as it was. For it 50 years later to be what it is today, off the same basic platform that he came up with back then, it's pretty cool.
So I guess the main changes would probably be, as I saw, the air actuation.
Yeah.
The case probably.
Cases, believe it or not, the case is so similar to what it was back in the 70s. It's
magnesium,
Other than the magnesium, they were aluminum back then. Originally, they were aluminum.
Okay.
But Drag Racer wants the lightest thing that they can possibly get that will do the job for them.
So is the magnesium lighter than the aluminum?
Magnesium is lighter than aluminum.
Okay.
Considerably.
And it's stronger, isn't it?
No, it's actually, technically, it's a little bit more brittle, a little bit weaker, but you can get magnesium through heat treat and different compositions to pretty much mimic aluminum, but it's not near as strong as, say, billet aluminum.
But being lighter obviously matters. Yes. Yeah, I think I've seen where they have like a holly red. I just learned this the other day that they have a holly box that's just 2 pounds lighter than the other box.
Okay.
Like, that's wild.
Yeah.
What about like the gearing, the pattern, the pitch, the coatings? That's
the biggest changes would be the tooth profiles. So tooth profiles, we've learned a lot. Materials, of course, materials have come a long ways, for us at least. Like materials we're using today were not around 50 years ago. But some of them were around 20 years ago, and we didn't quite, migrate to them yet because we didn't need to. Again, necessity. So we make a lot of 300M shafts. Well, 300M works to a pretty major extent of the components. It works really good for us, but there's sometimes you have to go to, say, a Mar aging material because the 300M just simply isn't going to handle the torque capacity, or doesn't have the torque capacity. So you can go to a Mar aging material. So we've learned a lot in metallurgy, heat treat designs. Most of the stuff was taught to me from my dad. Some of it just learned on the street. Nicole has the luxury of having some schooling behind her. I don't. Mine's all from just trial and error and learning. And,
I'll be honest, though, I probably have learned more from him as far as material-wise than with school. He is a very smart man.
But, I think the cool thing is having access to some of the newer softwares.
Sure. That
can really kind of help. And then some of the new fluids that come out, different, I guess, different viscosities, different, additives, different things like that. I see on some of the teeth, there's like a little notch in it. Does that do anything, or is that just patterned?
That notch is an identification groove to tell me what material we made the stuff out of. So that notch does nothing functionally other than if, let's just say, we completely grenade a transmission, which again doesn't happen, but if it did happen,
you can find that too.
We can look at it and say, okay, well, these were the ones that we made out of this material. So you'll find components sometimes where we make an identical component, and sometimes one will have one notch, one will have two, we could have three, we could have no notches. There's 4 different materials for the exact same component. And over time, we learn which ones develop maybe cracks or which ones wear quicker. And we might weed out 2 of those and just keep 2 materials that. So a lot of the stuff we do isn't necessarily from book smart. It is trial and error. There's parts in an NHRA Pro Stock transmission today that we still throw different materials at. And I mean, I'm not saying we do anything behind the customer's back, but they don't necessarily know we do it. We're trying to better a product for them.
Right.
And if they ever have a problem with it, show me a failed part and let's see what we can learn from it. We make a Harley ramp right now for a Harley Davidson that we have 4 different materials that we make it out of. And George Bryce is going to kill me for even mentioning this because he's the one we make it for. But now that people know there's 4 different materials, they're going to know which one they have. But and George doesn't even know what material they are, but we have them in 4 materials. If we start having any type of failures, which we don't, he would send them back to me, and we would at least learn from the different markings on them. Now, those don't have identification grooves because his customers, he thinks, would be too question why this has a different groove than their last one. So the differences on theirs are so minute that I have to look at them under a microscope to see what material that even was because of the tooling changes. And again, not going to point them out because I don't need them looking for them.
They're going to look anyways.
Yeah,
You know they
well,
are.
now they will.
But, well,
unless we edit that out.
But I mean, I guess the cool thing though is that it shows that you're interested in getting better,
Yes.
even though you don't really necessarily have to, right? You know, you're
Sometimes
always looking for the future.
But, you know, yeah, you never know. Like you say, or like I said, my dad never thought we'd be at this point. What does the future bring? 10 years from now, where are we going to be? So if we can help be ready for that, yes, we want to be ready for it.
Right. And we'll think about how fast things have advanced, right?
Right.
You know, I remember in 2007, when the Z06 comes out, 500 horsepower. 500 horsepower was a lot.
Oh, yeah.
And now they're like, 1,000 from the factory. I'm like,
Right.
no. So where do you think we're going to be, you know, in 10 years? God knows where it's going to be.
Yeah.
Something I wanted to ask, I see these other transmissions. Is this other stuff that you guys work with, or?
Yes. So a lot those behind me right now are the Tremic platform. Tremic builds a couple of very nice transmissions right out of the box that work for the vast majority of people that want to utilize it. So there's a TKX transmission and a T56 Magnum. The Magnum transmission is they make it in a 6. They also have a 7-speed, but it's mostly known as a 6-speed transmission. TKX is a 5-speed single overdrive. Both of those transmissions, again, work very, very well out of the box, but a lot of my customers want something better than out of the box, different than out of the box. So they come to us for whether it be custom ratios, possibly custom input shaft lengths, custom shifter locations. Face plating is one of the biggest things that people.
I've heard about that. What is face plating actually?
Face plating it was pretty much a step up from what my dad originally designed the Pro Ring. So Pro shifting made something where it shifted at high RPM. You still had to use the clutch. Face plating, you still have to use the clutch. Unless you put some type of load. So you need something to disrupt the power through the drivetrain. It will shift fully clutchless. The problem is you will probably blow up the gear set because its face plating has a solid slider with lugs on both sides of it. So you have to physically pull it out of one gear to go through a neutral gate to get it into the next gear. If you're still in the throttle and still on the clutch, the motor accelerates in that neutral gate and slams into the next gear, which is spinning at a lesser RPM than the previous gear it was in. It's the clash is rather tremendous. So it is designed for clutch assisted or some type of an interrupter. But what it does allow you to do is take the stock transmission and shift at pretty much unlimited RPMs. And drag racers, what do they love? RPM, especially, you know, the high RPM shifting. And transmissions just aren't designed to handle that. And then when you start wrapping a car up that much and twisting a car up, you don't necessarily have the air gap that you thought you had when the car was sitting stagnant in the pits. You can check your air gap. Well, when you wind everything up and then you're pushing that pedal quicker, a lot of these things are, they have cables, clutch cables instead of rigid linkage, and the cable stretch. All this added dynamic that fights against a synchronized transmission.
Yeah.
Shifting, we eliminate all the synchronizing. It falls in and out of gear now.
So I did a long time ago. I was working on a Corvette and we pulled the trans out. And this car made about 1,000, but it made it for like 5 or 6 years. And when I pulled the trans apart, the gears, I guess, you know, the Christmas trees, the gears looked like they had been, you know, paper thin on the end.
Yeah.
So this is where your transmission doesn't have the issue,
Right.
because this is 2 countershafts fighting, and that's why it was shaving it, right?
Yep. A single cluster transmission, yes, you have the side loading, and then you, especially a lot of your stock transmissions are helical gears. So as soon as you get any separation on a helical gear, it rides on a complete different pattern than it was designed for, and you get a lot of gear wear.
Right, and yours, I
With
forget
the dual countershaft, we have spur gear.
Spur gears, right.
So they're straight tooth. The straight tooth isn't necessarily a huge benefit. It's easier for manufacturing. So we could make that a helical because without the actual separation of the teeth, it's still going to live just fine.
But it won't sound as cool.
It won't sound near as
Yeah.
cool. Yeah.
That's the difference.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't realize how those things sound.
Yeah.
I've seen an in-car video. I'm like, man, that is wild.
Yeah.
It gives supercharger wine a whole new level.
Oh yeah.
So basically, on the T56, the main reason I want to bring that up is because a lot of my customer base, I tune late model GM.
Mhm.
So a lot of my customer base, we have that transmission, or we have the 7-speed. So you offer the services for all of those?
Yes. For
Okay.
absolutely everything you could possibly want. So if you like a stock synchronized transmission, but you just need it stepped up a little bit, we have, so I mentioned where we feel very strong in metallurgy. We work with sometimes cryo, sometimes shot peen, sometimes just surface enhancement. And then also drawing down the gears. We call it thermal stabilization, but it's setting the Rockwells of the different components to the transmission to where they're best suited for your particular application. So
Because every metal is not,
right,
every section in the trans doesn't need the same hardness.
right,
Right.
And that's what Rockwell is, right?
Right.
Hardness.
Yep.
Long time ago, different customer, tail shaft coming out of the trans broke off in the differential.
Hmm.
And we sent one out to have it cryo treated, and that was their fix to it, and it fixed it.
Okay.
But you guys do that in house.
Yes.
And what is cryo treating doing?
Cryo, that's
Super cold.
It's 300 degrees below zero. So that's what it's ultimately, that's the process is taking something 300 below and then bringing it back to room temperature. The rate that you bring it from the 300 below to about 120 below is where all the conversion is done. It's not really bringing it down to the 300. It's between the 300 bringing it back up. And so different components go off different rates. Not everybody that does cryo really, I think, takes it quite to the levels that we do and
Right.
understands it maybe like we do. I've seen people just take it right out of the 300 below and put it to atmosphere. You can actually do as much damage with cryo as you can enhance something with cryo.
Oh, okay.
If
You bring it up
handled
too fast, maybe?
if handled improperly. So you do have to know what you're doing with it. So just like I've had people try cryo and say, "Oh no, I'm never doing that again. It failed even quicker." How
Yeah.
about you let us try it?
Yeah, I was gonna say,
And
there's
then
always
all of a sudden they say, "Well, that really worked. How come?" I know why, but I don't necessarily want to educate my competition too much either.
Right,
But we
right.
do feel that we are more, I don't know, I don't want to say more intelligent. I don't want to sound, egotistical or arrogant or anything, but I do believe that we know what we're doing when we do something like shot peen. So shot peen is one of the processes we use. And shot peen, people could say it's just sandblasting with heavy media. No,
not really.
There's a lot more to shot peen than arc intensities and pressures and media size. There's just a lot to it. If you shot peen with the same process on every component, well then no, you're not benefiting from shot peen the way you are supposed to be benefiting from it. The synchro teeth should get a different shot peen, complete different process than the gear teeth for ultimate benefit. But I don't know how many people really understand that. We do. We enjoy learning this stuff and then, giving our customer the benefit of the knowledge. So I do feel that we take our metal enhancements to the highest level each individual aspect of our enhancements can be. So can somebody else shot peen as well as we can? Absolutely. Can somebody else out there surface enhance like we do? Absolutely. Can somebody else use cryo as intelligently, or I'll use that word again, but as we do? Absolutely. But is there anybody else that I can think of out there that uses those combinations together and as beneficial as we do? I don't know of them. No.
Right. Well, and I guess a lot of that, I think, attributes like when we building an engine, the guy that does a lot of engines for us, I noticed on the main bearings, he uses different ones in different spots.
Mm-hmm.
And I dealt with a lot of engine builders in the past, and they just, this is the size we use, and we run it through the whole deal. And after I saw that, to see how long these engines are lasting, I'm like, doing 6L90 transmissions,
Mm-hmm.
we don't put the same clutches in every clutch pack.
Right.
Because everyone has like a different a different shear rate and a different apply force, different things like that, different centrifugal forces. So to see that you're doing that in the transmission really kind of shows that, you know, you've tested everything individually and you're trying to get the best out of that product.
Correct.
But I didn't even know that you guys did the T56, so I'm kind of excited about that. Have you messed with the 7-speed a lot?
Not a whole lot. The 7-speed, we definitely haven't faceplated any because it's just an extra overdrive. So our customer base wants first through fourth gear faceplated, and so the guys that we do the enhancements for the 7-speed, yes, that stuff we do. The shot being the cryo, thermal stabilization, and surface enhancement. That stuff on the 7-speed is it's nice. It's big benefit. If you ever drove one of our, what we call an upgrade sync transmission, so we'll take a Tremec transmission and enhance the shifting capabilities of it. And we call it upgrade sync, and the sync, of course, short for synchronized. So we leave it synchronized. It's not faceplated. But if you ever drive one of those compared to a stock one out of the box, don't get me wrong, very nice transmission. But if you ever compare the two, especially if you're really pushing it, you really would like our upgrade sync transmission.
The engagement's just a lot easier.
It's definitely more crisp, but it synchronizes so much faster. The drag coefficients that we use, just every aspect of what we do to it.
No, for the cone.
For the cones, it's a 3-piece cone on those, or 3-piece synchro friction material. But it's just, I guess I can't really get into a whole lot of what we do, but it's just we call it our upgrade sync package. And like I say, you try it, you'll really like it. You'll appreciate what we do.
Yeah, I think so. Just so I understand it 100%. So is the faceplating similar to like how that one? I know that one has like a ramp off, right? But is it similar as like a dog pattern? I guess
it is. It is. It would be a dog box. It would be since it's non-synchronized. Some people use the term crash box because it will crash and crunch into gear. The difference of it is from, say, that transmission, as we point that direction, is the clutchless transmissions. That's designed for clutchless shifting. So it's got a slider that's in first gear. Then you put another slider in second gear. And the simple function of putting it in second gear speeds up the main shaft. So the slider for first gear ramps out of first gear. There's never a momentary loss of power. So that's a true clutchless. We can make a Tremec shift into gear once it's into the neutral gate smoothly and as quick as a clutchless. But the problem you have is you have a neutral gate in there. So you have to pull it out of one gear again, go through the neutral gate. And when you cross that, it throws off the whole dynamic. So it's not a clutchless shift by any means.
But at some point there is a momentary power loss.
There's a momentary power loss on each individual.
Whether it's watt box or
correct,
or just because of the way that it's
going. And then that momentary power loss also allows your motor to rev up and everything mismatch on RPM. So it's if you use the clutch with it, it works absolutely beautiful, exactly the way it was designed. You start getting into some type of a load cell, it can work even better, but it can also be detrimental because people don't always know how to use a load cell.
A lot of people cut power and don't do it the right way and end up hurting engines.
Yes, you can hurt engines, you can hurt transmissions. It can actually make us look pretty bad because you hurt the faceplate stuff, and hey, I don't like this faceplate. It wasn't the faceplate; it was the way you utilize it. You utilize it the way it's designed. You'll absolutely love it if what you're looking for is high RPM power shift capabilities.
Now, is that something that can be daily driven? Because
it can. It's just a little loud, but because you hear it clunking when you're shifting into gear. But
it's a race car.
I was gonna say, racers.
It's a street car.
Yeah.
We've got kids that deliver pizzas with them because they just love it. This is what their everyday car is.
Some people just like that feel.
What I wouldn't do is throw the keys to your buddy and say, here, go take it for a ride, because there's a little bit of a learning curve to it. So I wouldn't give it to some drag strip. Sure, it's designed for that. It's designed for high RPM power shifting, upshifting down a drag strip. That's what it's designed for. Driving it around on the street, absolutely can be done. And some people can do it better than they can a synchronized. They like it more than a synchronized. You can do it with rev matching. You can do it without the clutch, upshifting and downshifting. You don't even have to use the clutch if you can rev match it and get the clunk right into gear.
Right.
And again, I get kids that deliver pizzas with them. Would I? Probably not. I want something a little more comfortable.
Well, so what's the future? What do you guys, what's in the works? Anything? Maybe
this is the future. Go ahead.
Maybe a back and forth shifter for the Tremec.
Well, the LSC is we already somewhat have a shifter like that.
Well, we actually have a sequential. You can put a sequential shifter into a Tremec. We have a sequential shifter we designed many, many years ago. And we actually, for whatever reason, never quite finished it. It's fully designed. But there is a sequentially shifted Tremec gear set that is available that we can install into a Tremec. So if sequential is what you're looking for, but really my customer base, or our customer base, is big RPM. That's what they really want, and big horsepower, big torque capacity, big shock load capacity. So what we're looking at doing is taking the next step for our clutchless transmission. You got this very strong dual countershaft transmission. We're going to put a sequential shifter on the top of it, an H-pattern shifter on the top of it. Basically, the top of the case is just a flange. You can completely unbolt that and put a different box on top of it, depending on what you want to do.
Okay.
So our sequential is probably our next sequential will be in our clutchless transmission. It'll also be an H-pattern in our clutchless transmission.
Would that be more for a street, or?
So there's some H-pattern racing out there where you have to have an H-pattern shifter. That's what it's really designed for. But can you drive it on the street? We can now put solid sliders in it, similar to, say, like the Tremec transmission, where first and second are on the same slider. Now you can only get it into one gear at one time. Now we can actually make it where it is more streetable. It'll still be non-synchronized, but we can make it where it is much more streetable. Yes. But as far as for the overall future of the company, that's going to actually be Nicole there. So that's short future. These are things that are already in the works. But long-term future,
I mean, my plan would be kind of to evolve as far as maybe going outside of just transmissions.
Hold on, let's redo that one.
Okay.
That's okay. All right. Go ahead.
I'm kind of picturing looking outside the box a little bit in the far future. Maybe just sticking with automotive, absolutely, and high performance, but maybe looking at components outside of the transmission, just broaden what we are able to handle.
As in, like, components to work with the trans, or just different components in general?
Just different components in general. Like so we have a 632 car that we race together, and seeing like some of the failures outside of transmission related, anything that we see there, we could benefit from, that other customers could benefit from, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so kind of just broadening it out.
Yeah, we have a full machine shop. We have a lot of capabilities that I don't know if people actually understand that we do. So I think we can handle it. Yeah.
I think that'll be really cool. That's what I was saying. The new age, everything's a lot different than it used to be, even 10, 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. I know I'm not, that old, but I've been around for quite a while, and it's always kind of crazy how fast things evolve. Mm-hmm. And you never know. I mean, your street cars are making 2,000-3,000 horsepower now. Yeah. So how do we know that we're not going to be making 5,000? Yeah. And even at 3,000 horsepower, people think they're not fast enough.
Right.
So the way
I think we all have mental instabilities, but it's okay.
The way I see it, 30 years from now, she may be sitting here doing an interview just like this, and you can ask her, did your dad ever think that the business would be like this? And she's going to have to think back, but probably not. And like, I have no clue where she's going to take the company someday. And I have faith that it's going to go in the right direction, but it's everything's a risk. And hopefully some of her risks pay off.
But if your dad didn't take that risk, we wouldn't have this awesome transmission. Right?
He would have retired from Cadillac Motor Company, and there would not be a Liberty's gears. So
yeah. Which,
I don't know what I would be doing. That would have been
terrible.
Yeah, I don't know what I would be doing today. I don't know what, transmissions would be in drag racing today.
Yeah. Well, we're grateful that it's here. Mm-hmm. I know the race car industry is grateful that it's here. Mm-hmm. Optimistic. I really think that, obviously you've got a really solid product, and it's really nice to kind of see that you're always evolving. Mm-hmm. So I appreciate y'all sitting down with me. It was really good.
Oh yeah,
Thank
thank
you for the
Where-
opportunity.
Where can people find you guys?
We have, libertiesgears.com is just our website. We have Facebook. Actually, Liberties Gears Racing News. We have someone who covers a lot of our customers and does a great job for us with that. I have an Instagram that I update just for our racing. Yeah. There's
What is it?
nliberty3306.
All right. So follow them, check them out. Thanks again for sitting down with us.